God, I miss making my recordings in the woods. It was so fun. That Tualatin Hills Valley Natural Park. Got all these old recordings, and I bet they're all gone now. I had this other phone, and anyway, okay. I keep trying to refine this and getting it so that you have one simple answer, one simple... Look, believe it or not, I think you really can explain almost everything that matters in about... You can kind of hint at, you can summarize in a way that I think genuinely makes sense. In a way that genuinely makes sense, you can summarize everything that matters in like a minute, in like 3 sentences. Your loneliness and the loneliness of others. That's literally it. If you want to know what one thing, to boil it down, to find a core from which you can spin off and find secondary factors to pay attention to, if you want to know one thing, if you want to be a true rationalist, but with the equivalent of a religionist's sense of clarity and crispness of singular focus, it's for your life, it is your loneliness. I mean, you gotta read the Johann Hari book. You gotta like do what it takes to get to the point where what I'm about to say is credible. But the research is very clear. Like, this is what inspired me to say this. He was just talking about a piece of research where he said where if you went from being, okay, so here's not depressed, here's not lonely at all, here's absolutely 100% lonely, here's the middle. If you move, it was something like, if you just go from 50% to 65%, from 50% lonely to 65% lonely, you are 8 times more likely to be depressed. That's how connected this is. So if you want one thing, one simple thing, pay attention to your feelings of loneliness. Pay attention to your feelings of loneliness. That's your guide for your life. Everything else that's the Jesus, that's God. Everything else is like secondary. In fact, it's not wholly unlike Jesus and God. Christians often pay attention as a core value in their lives to how close am I to Jesus, how close am I to God, how close am I to my neighbors, how close am I to my family. That is actually being borne out by evidence. That is correct. This is exactly the problem with the new atheism. This is exactly the problem with thinkers like Sam Harris. They're irrational. They don't understand that you can actually take a step back from religion and look at it objectively. And this is why thinkers like Brett Weinstein are trying to correct thinkers like Sam Harris as respectfully as they know how, and get him to listen to thinkers like Jordan Peterson more, and also trying to get thinkers like Jordan to listen to thinkers like Sam more, and creating more sort of cross-fertilization and interdisciplinary action. Which all sounded worse than I meant it to be. So that's one thing. Okay, so I said I could summarize it in 1 second, and it was the loneliness, your loneliness, and the loneliness of others. Now that's an equally crisp thing. If you want to save the world, if you want to know what to pay attention to, a singular thing to pay attention to, from which you can spin off a million more complex and nuanced ideas, rules of thumb. But the singular heuristic, the singular measure of how well our likelihood of surviving on the planet is, it's collective loneliness. If you want to know how well capitalism is doing, just look at how isolated the people are. The more isolated the people are, the better capitalism is going to be doing. In a nutshell, because the more you can sell them stuff, the more desperately they'll go to jobs to earn money to make purchases. And the more desperately they'll make those purchases because they're lonely. If you want to know how well movements are doing, on the other hand, how well, socialism is doing, or how well, and I'm not talking about new radical lefty isolationist tribal garbage. I'm talking about how well real movements are doing. Movements that are meant to bring people together, not divide them. If you want to know how well the world is doing, or how well real movements are doing, you can just, how connected are they making? How much are they sewing people together? How well are people getting organized? How much healthy tribalism is on a revival in the world? That's it. You want to know how bad civilization is? Look at how much it isolates people. You want to know how good civilization is? Look at how much it connects people. If you want to know, this one's harder, it's more complex, but I think it's actually ultimately the same. The human organism is meant to be connected. We're a social organism. So it's ironic and weird for me to talk about it in a way that's disconnecting me. So I'm going to wrap this up. I think I made the case fairly clearly for that individual paying attention to your loneliness as the core factor to determine where to guide your life. If it leads to more connectedness, more feelings of connection, it is good for you. If it leads to more isolation, more loneliness, it is bad for you. That's your advice in a way that you can actually figure out how to apply everywhere in your life. Don't ask me, don't ask your mom whether or not you should talk to her more on Saturdays, or whether or not you should journal more, or whether you should travel or stay put. Ask yourself, does journaling lead me to feel more connected overall, or does it lead me to feel more lonely overall? Does journaling in a certain way, does this hobby or that, is porno bad for me? All of these questions, I'm giving you the key to answer. And of course, again, this is just finding that core, that bedrock. You can spin off the more subtle, like maybe you learn that, you learn secondary heuristics. This is the core heuristic from which all others can be built. The core rule of thumb. Just like, again, to analogize and be like a Christian. That which brings me closer to Christ. Okay, and then secondary rules of thumb are like, okay, that which brings me closer to my neighbors, because being closer to my neighbors brings me closer to Christ, or whatever it is, You can, it's an organizing principle. I'm sure you get it, okay, yeah. But what is this secondary thing? That's the interesting thing. How do you analyze society? Well, you assume that others are the same as you. You accept that you're not the only social organism on the planet. You're one of many, and all other humans are hyper-social organisms. So now you've got a heuristic for measuring everything in existence that matters. How good is a philosophy? How true is a movement's core values? How functional is a democracy? How likely are we to escape global warming? Believe it or not, it's going to be most centrally affected by how connected we are, how connected we're feeling. Less connection, more atomization, more corporate rule, less likelihood of survival, more greenhouse gases, more connected, more of what I'm calling this healthy tribalism, which I admit is kind of the opposite of the Hatfield versus McCoy McCarthyism of the new left, and the way the right is taking advantage of the unfortunate developments on the left, the way that the elites seem to be really capitalizing on all of this. They're conning people. They're even conning people like me. They're getting people like me to become more and more against social change itself, because I'm letting myself throw out the baby with the bathwater, because the new radical left, or the new regressive left, is problematic in its own terms and according to its own standards. And it's also, they want you to forget about everything. They want you to just they do want to just shift everyone over more conservative. There is a lot that guys like Jordan Peterson don't talk about. They conveniently critique the Soviet system. They don't talk about all of the blood on democracy's hands. So, maybe just Google Chomsky hypocrisy to get more into that. There's a reason why Chomsky talks so much about the actions of his government, not the convenient evils of other governments. That's actually very standard. For decades in the Soviet system, all the Soviet intelligentsia were always talking about, all the Soviet elite thinkers, all the Soviet intellectuals, all the Soviet Jordan Petersons, for decades, all they ever talked about were the horrors of the Western systems. See, and then for decades, Jordan just follows in an almost cowardly old tradition of decrying the evils of the other guy. Whoop-de-doo, You want to be brave, you want to speak some truth, decry the evils of your people. I hate to drone on about Chomsky, but this reminds me of how, when he goes to Palestine, he doesn't tell them all about the evils of the of Israel. He tells them about what the PLO is doing that they shouldn't be doing. And then when he goes across the river, he'll, usually when he's in the neighborhood, he would do a talk and I guess he would often get invited on both sides. And so he would go talk to, go give a talk in Israel. And then, he'd piss them off because he wouldn't talk about all the evils of the PLO. He'd talk about the evils of Israel. Tell the people what they're doing wrong is a horrible interpersonal philosophy because people will not want to talk to you anymore. But it does make sense as the most upstanding philosophy you can have. So if you're a Jordan Peterson fan, here's a way to do what Jordan Peterson says and not do as he does. He says, speak the truth. Well, I suppose you have to kind of find out the truth first. And if all you ever study is Soviet atrocities, you won't find out about the truth very much. So actually, him and Sam Harris should be best friends, because if you read the Sam Harris email debate with Noam Chomsky, you can see how much, in fact, in agreement thinkers like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris are. They like to quibble over these differences of the truth, but they both fundamentally agree in sort of never questioning the civilizational American state itself and kind of giving it a pass. So, how does any of this connect to what I'm saying? I don't know. Actually, it's a tangent. Maybe it doesn't, but I think it does, and I think actually you can figure that out for yourself. It's all going to come down to how well are things. Apply my own rule of thumb. Help me out here. I'm gonna watch this again, and maybe I'll think of things and make an addendum video. But in case I don't get around to that, the question is, I leave it to you. Is watching this making you feel more connected? If it's making you feel a little more isolated, stop. Do something else. That's an example of enacting my personal rule of thumb. What's my collective rule of thumb? It's the same. Is engaging in conversations, are certain things, are they bringing us together? Are they creating small groups that don't have as their primary identity that which they're against? The new radical left isn't bringing people together even within itself. They're not even bringing themselves together. They're fractionating. It's like the way the Christian church fell apart and schismed over the last 2,000 years into 2,000 different sects. In fact, it's almost perfectly analogous, because I've kind of discovered that politics is the same as religion. Ideology is religion. And that isn't to say that religion is bad. Religion is neither bad nor good. It's just things that are religious. So again, is it bringing people together in healthy ways that are connecting people and creating more of that individual sense of non-loneliness? Because it's going to connect to that Nassim Taleb thing. It's going to connect to the black swan. It's going to connect to anti-fragility. And what's anti-fragile for the individual human psyche is anti-fragile for the collective groups of humans, the tribes, the countries, the civilizations, which our civilization clearly needs to split off into multiple different semi-autonomous civilizations. If the human race is to survive, we're not going to find a utopian solution. The leadership of our civilization is never going to come to the light. But, things could kind of fractionate off in a healthy way. tribalize in a healthy way, again, where it's not just more atomization and you think you're in the radical left, say, or you think you're in the alt-right, say, and in reality there's no connectivity, there's no tribalism. In fact, terrifyingly enough, for all I know, the alt-right is creating more healthy tribalism among their individuals than the alt-left is. How fucking terrifying would that be? If the place in radical politics where you can actually find something like family would be on the alt-right, because the left isn't going to give it to you, right? Humans will seek non-loneliness. They will seek belonging. And if it is only available in a cult, then they'll join a cult. So again, paying attention to loneliness is the key factor. How lonely and isolated are people? And whatever you're doing, whatever philosophy you're supporting, whatever vision, whatever truth you're finding, yes, pay attention to how factually accurate these things are. Yes, pay attention to history. Yes, pay attention to like Chomsky level objective, actually what happened history, and science, and just being reasonable, being rational, being truthful, being honest in your investigations. So you're not measuring the facts according to how well they connect people. You're measuring your use of the facts. Any movement can use facts to lie. In fact, almost all of the expert lies are told. Almost all of the mass level deceptions, almost all of the individual self-deceptions are done with facts. That's not the measure. The measure is, are your facts helping you to connect? Is your lifestyle helping you to connect to yourself and others? And is your philosophy that you are belonging to helping to connect others into a functional world? Even all the tribes of the Plains Indians say we're often very connected in a tribe of tribes. The old tribal, even when all the war you've heard about among tribes, they actually kind of helped define each other more than they were just out to destroy each other all the time. In fact, you can kind of psychologically prove that tribal peoples weren't constantly playing annihilator and trying to destroy each other all the time by the very fact that there was like 1,000 languages being spoken in the area that is now the United States when the first settlers were arriving. You don't get 1,000 languages by just, how many languages are there spoken in the United States now? Yeah, like maybe 100. That destruction of diversity is proof of a certain mentality, the kind of conquest mentality. If you've got thousands of languages being spoken, that's not because, the one top thing emerged. In fact, you can look at all of biology. You don't have like one top predator at every level and one main prey item. You don't have like the lions killed all of the hyenas and all the other species and all the other big cats. It just wouldn't make any sense. And human tribes are actually the same way. We diversified. Human beings evolved to be different from the other great apes, and then we evolved 1,000, 1 million, maybe, in all of human history, different languages. So that diversification. So there's not a paradox here. Connectedness and diversity don't actually go against each other. The entire world is one big synthesis, one big biome of mutualism. It couldn't be more connected, and it couldn't be more diverse. Every leaf on every tree is a little bit different. So we have to get over that illusion that connectedness and diversity go against each other, that we need everyone to be the same, that we need a utopian vision, let alone an authoritarian utopian vision, right? So again, with the personal rule of thumb, we've got that, right? That's nailed. That's pretty simple. That's a bedrock heuristic. Does it make you feel lonely? Does it make you feel more connected? And then, what about your philosophies? Which movements do you believe in? Which political orientations are you a part of? Which economic philosophies? Which practices? Which styles of democracy? Who you vote for? What things you repeat and post on your Facebook? Okay, same connected rule of thumb, except a less selfish version. Does it connect others? Don't make yourself feel all isolated in your attempt to connect others. That you probably can't do that. That which makes you feel more and more lonely and isolated is almost certainly not going to be connecting others. That's martyrdom. So, same rule of thumb. Feel more connected, pay attention to connection, pay attention to loneliness, and encourage connection in others as your basic rule of thumb for how life really works. I'm going to stop being a hypocrite and go reconnect, because this is absurd, right? What am I doing? All right. So hopefully that creates a little bit of ownership and connection, and I'm not being completely stupid and self-destructive, in addition to being maybe hypocritical, because, but doing this for long enough would lead me to just feel more isolated. But it feels really good. It felt really good, and it feels really good to connect. And I guess I hit the point of diminishing returns, and so thank you. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if this is any kind of meta example, of like trying to pay attention to this stuff. I've certainly got a lot to learn. I have become incredibly isolated in many ways in my life, and I think you can imagine why when you are a person this disorganized who's having these kinds of thoughts where you're constantly thinking on these high level things, but you're super disorganized and you don't have like a bunch of people. I'm a little bit like Jordan Peterson. Like, it sounds like he also kind of drove himself crazy trying to figure shit out. So I can kind of connect with his thinking style. It might be part of the reason why I let him talk me into a little more of him than I really should have listened to. People are incorrect to dismiss him as, just a bigot, but I think people are also incorrect to kind of worship him. So just taking that as an example, off I go, and here we go, back to life. Goodbye. I know I get clingy. Yeah, I'm telling you, it all connects. It all makes sense somehow. Yeah, love you guys.